Hey, welcome back to the channel, and welcome to the abandoned Kings Park Psychiatric Center in the iconic Building 93. So this is an abandoned psychiatric center located on Long Island in New York. And this place originally opened in 1885 to help alleviate overcrowding from asylums that existed closer to New York City. So it operated from 1885 until its eventual closure in 1996. So 111 years. But this campus is absolutely massive. I have no clue how to even go about doing a proper exploration of it. So at its height, in the years immediately following World War II, this center had something like 150 buildings and over 9,000 patients. But with the invention of, I believe it's called Thorazine, which was one of the first medications developed to help treat mental illness, the need for asylums like this to house mentally ill individuals started decreasing drastically. And so the need for a 150 building massive campus, basically a self-contained community like this, dwindled as well. And so from the mid-50s or so until, like I mentioned, 1996 when it closed, there was this sort of slow decline, from my understanding, of buildings closing up shop as they became obsolete or not needed anymore, until eventually the entire place shut down. And so in 2000, just a couple of years after the closure of the center, state government opened the Nissequogue State Park, which housed the portion of the old campus that is closest to the water. But this part here, where we are now, actually still sat as opened and potentially open for redevelopment until 2007, when the state government bought up the second half of the land here that contained the other half of the psychiatric center and incorporated that into the state park as well. And so today you have what we are walking through now, and hopefully I'm pronouncing it right, the Nissequogue State Park, that was made, from my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong for those who know better than me, was made for the purpose of preserving the, I believe, 50-ish buildings that still remain, that are spread out, possibly more, across this massive footprint of a campus. There are no actual plans to redevelop any of this. They've attempted over the years to propose redevelopment plans, to propose plans to at least tear down all of or a large portion of the number of buildings that still remain, but thus far none of those plans have come to fruition. And so there is this, I keep mentioning, a state park with all of these crazy abandoned buildings just sitting here. And as I was driving in, you have all sorts of people out here walking, biking, just doing various recreational activities that you would find within a state park, except all against the backdrop of, let's just pretend that all of these giant abandoned buildings just aren't here. Let's just wander around, take a look what we can see, what we can get access to. Let's start out maybe by going back to this place here and talking about that a little bit. This was actually the violent patient ward, basically where people were housed who were prone to violent outbursts. And I cannot verify this, so I hesitate to even mention it, but I heard on one podcast, someone claimed that there was a serial killer that was housed here, but they didn't say who it was and didn't offer any other information about that, and I couldn't find anything else, so that might not be true, but yeah. This is the Wisteria building, I believe. One of the reasons why I waited this long to check out this place, and this campus in general, is because it is and has been completely and totally picked clean by explorers before me. I mean, when you get into the sort of urban exploration scene and you start looking up places to check out, Kings Park is typically one of the first things that comes up on most lists. And so at first it was, I don't want to go do something that everybody else has done. I want to find my own sort of unique stuff. And then once I decided to look into it a little bit, I realized just the absurdly massive footprint of this place. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm going to wait until I get a drone, because if I can't access a lot of the buildings, I can at least use a drone to do a lot of aerial footage and aerial flyovers. And that has obviously not happened yet, and so I just decided to pull the trigger now, come and check it out. We'll see what we can see, kind of go from there. And I'm not actually sure when it closed, but it was built, I believe, in 1939. And it sits right up next to, I mean, this building is just so absurdly cool. There is zero chance that this camera is picking up how, I can't think of the word, like, massive, I guess, maybe it's just like, it has a very, very intense presence to it. So building 93 here, which I mentioned at the beginning, is arguably the most iconic building here, likely because it's the most photogenic, it's the most, it just has, like I mentioned, the largest presence. And so this was one of the main patient wards at the psychiatric center. And what's interesting about this is that it was actually phased out, or it was shut down in phases. So I mentioned in the 50s, as Thorazine became more readily available, and the need for these psychiatric asylums, hospitals, whatever, became, the demand became less, and patients started leaving. The need for these huge buildings and all this was no longer needed. And so starting in the 70s, they actually systematically started shutting down the building from the top floors down. They closed down the floors at the top, and then sort of as demand decreased, they systematically continued shutting down the building until it ultimately closed in 1992. Just 4 years before the entire psychiatric center shut down. Is imposing the right word? I keep wanting to say it's imposing, but just the massive nature of this building. And I mean, typically when you have places like this, and this you will see is not the only example, or it's not the only situation like this, but typically we've seen in our other videos, when you have buildings like this, they do a whole heck of a lot more than just put up this easily bypassable fence here to keep people out. But I just cannot get over the fact, I mean, look at this. I just cannot get over the fact that this is part of a state park. Like, there's a path right here. A footpath that goes through the woods. And I also learned that they host a sunset 5K here every June. I'm also into running, and so I think I'm going to be coming back up here in June to do a sunset 5K that runs partly along that path there throughout this entire campus. I mean, I don't understand what the end game is here. And so I actually have no idea what this building is, but I'm wondering if it was some sort of support for Building 93 here. Oh yeah, I mean, this doesn't even have a fence or anything around it to even pretend to act like it's trying to keep people out. It's such a shame people do stuff like this. I don't get it. But speaking of doing tagging and graffiti and general vandalism, one of the things that I read was that a lot of the items and things were left here when the place was closed down, including murals that were drawn and painted by patients that have since been tagged over. Not like the public can really legally get in and check them out anyway, but I don't understand the mindset of taking something really cool. Like, for example, if you remember my mild obsession with that really cool mural at the Crescent State Correctional Institute, that abandoned prison in Pennsylvania, with the dude, I think he was playing a saxophone. I don't know why you would want to destroy something like that. To put your own, like, spray-painted graffiti art over top of it, but I don't know. Some people do, I guess. And so one last thing to show you before we move on to another part of the place, because apparently I can spend half an hour just wandering around this building. How wild is this? Building 93. This absurdly huge whatever, and then right there, youth soccer fields against the backdrop of another abandoned building right over there. I mean, this is just one of the most unique things I've seen, and I'm super glad I finally came up here to check it out. So you can see down there is the entrance to the waterfront portion of the park that has a lot of buildings still. But right here, just across the street from it, I believe is Building 90, which was a mix of business offices and a nursing school, I believe. So there are a whole bunch of buildings that look like small buildings back behind this one here, and I could not find any information on those. And I'm wondering, so at its height, this place was essentially like a self-contained city or town, self-sustaining town. Had a post office, a grocery store, bowling alley, swimming pools. They actually housed the majority of the employees on campus here with their own dedicated housing. And so I say that to say that I wonder if some of these buildings back here may have been some of those housing units. They definitely look like it. I'll see if I can zoom in a little bit. Oh, and then look at this. Like, what are these? Are these staff housing units? Maybe I just don't know how to Google properly after all these years, and there's a right word combination that'll get me the information I need. But it's shocking to me, with this being here, that there are so many videos of people exploring all these places and so little information about the specific details. Like, you would think someone would have published some sort of even like employee handbook or something from the 90s online somewhere, but again, maybe I just don't know how to internet very well. And actually, this is super cool. Looks like I was able to get back here farther than I thought. So again, I have no idea what these buildings are. We just have these like abandoned houses in the woods. Hopefully the camera can pick that up. That's an active residential neighborhood right up next to this. And this isn't even one of those like hidden in plain sight things. This is, I mean, state funded, state sponsored. This exists still in large part because of the New York State government. I mean, how often do you hear stuff like that? Or hear about stuff like that? Alright, so I definitely wonder, I'm venturing to guess these are probably some sort of staff housing. And so this was actually established at the time on a piece of farmland down by the water. And it was established as what I believe was called something like a farm colony or something along those lines, where part of the mental health treatment, I'm getting kind of hot, the mental health treatment was to essentially work the farm. I guess the feeling at the time, I don't know if this is true or just what people were saying to make themselves feel better about basically doing like, you know, slave labor or whatever, but they had patients essentially work the farm and work the surrounding fields and that as part of their treatment. But over time, like I mentioned, as this place grew, it started dealing with the same issues that it was built to help alleviate from the other places, which is the overcrowding. And so that eventually gave way as more and more buildings were constructed into becoming more of the traditional sort of asylum operation that we've seen. So this building here now that we're coming up to is actually the last building on campus to close. It was originally, I think it was built in 1934, so it was used as a mail reception building, whatever that is. And then after the hospital's closure in 1996, it transitioned into a long-term adult care facility before closing in November of 2012. So it actually stayed open for, what was that, 16 years after the hospital itself closed. Then this building over here, I believe, was just more sort of admin offices and business office type stuff. You can tell people just pulled this off. Crazy to me to think that after the majority of these buildings closed, not this one, but like when the hospital shut down and sort of the majority of the other buildings closed, that this was an active patient facility for long-term adult care in the midst of what was already sort of an environment of urban decay, I guess, if you will, or abandonment. I mean, it couldn't have been that great of an environment to be here, right? And so you can actually see a little path here that's been beaten down by people. Is that a way? Is that just a wide open door? There are people here right now just walking their dog, like back through and around these buildings. It's crazy. Hello. These buildings are so cool. I don't know, are you from here? I'm guessing?
Here. They were open when I was a child.
No kidding.
Yeah, I had friends that worked here, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
That has to be crazy.
Yeah, it was interesting. Very interesting.
So what are your feelings on it now then, seeing it like this?
I'm really sad that they couldn't preserve it for some purpose, because the buildings are fabulous.
They're amazing.
Yeah.
And it makes me super sad and super frustrated to see that they've just been allowed to sort of this, like building 93 down there.
Yeah.
I was just checking it out around the outside, and as I was leaving, there's a bunch of kids that just are just actively like ripping off stuff and like
it's been going on for years.
It's like, what are you doing?
You know, in the beginning they were like pretty good about not letting people get in, but I think they've just given up on it now.
It's kind of what
we think somebody's going to light a match to it one of these days.
You think so?
It's going to sell for pennies on the dollar.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, did I read correctly that a couple of the buildings have actually burned?
Yeah, there have been a couple. Enjoy.
Thank you so much. You too. So then, never mind everything that I read about this place being full of security and highly watched, I guess, is that the right word? Apparently is not true at all. At least according to that lady who lives around here, she says that they have all but just given up and have stopped even trying to stop people from breaking in and tagging and all that. So that's probably in part why those kids are down there just 10 a.m. on a Saturday, just open air, ripping boards off stuff, pulling down fencing. There's nobody to stop you. There's no incentive to not do it. Then, I mean, you're going to get people like that, and then they're going to go tell their friends. It's like that Wayne's World thing, right? They tell two friends, and they tell two friends. Nope. Man, people have just gutted these places. But part of what's been happening since the hospital shut down, a bunch of the buildings were, or a handful of the buildings were demolished. My understanding is they were demolished sort of in on themselves without proper asbestos abatement procedures being followed, and so I'm actually not sure where those buildings are, but that's part of the redevelopment holdup, is that would take the thousands of dollars to do that proper abatement. Several of the buildings have also, I guess they're wooden buildings, maybe some of the houses that we saw, have also burned down. I mean, I don't really know to the extent that you can burn these types of buildings down the insides, probably, I guess, but given that this is just a free-for-all, apparently, with no oversight whatsoever, it's actually a wonder that they haven't burned down yet. Look at these cool old lampposts. And how do you figure that every window in this place seems to have been boarded up, blown out, whatever, with the glass on these lampposts, pristine condition? So in the shadow of the hiking and biking trail where the 5K runs in June, as well as this active middle school right here and a sort of main proper road, we have the next set of buildings that I want to check out, which are these. And I believe these two white houses here were built towards the end of the life cycle, or the end of the lifespan of the hospital complex here, and were originally used as halfway houses. But after the closure of the hospital and the state government taking them over, they're now used for state government operations, I believe.
Do you know about the Potter's Fields?
No, what is that?
Where they buried them?
So I've heard about that, but I have no idea where that is.
So if you're over there, you'll see a water tower.
Okay, yep, I've seen.
And walk up there, and at the top, you'll see like there's a plaque dedicated to everybody that's buried there.
I just didn't know where it was.
Yeah,
so.
And then there's another one on Indian Head Road.
Okay.
There's like an ice rink over there. It's up behind there.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So you can actually see the plaque and the whatever.
Oh yeah, the plaque is dedicated to them.
Okay.
We went to high school here, and when they were digging to like put in a softball field, they found bodies. Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
It's the second time I've ran into those people. That's the same lady from the other admin or the adult daycare or day patient whatever place. So I'd heard that there were mass burials here for people that died and either didn't have family or didn't have any other way of basically, didn't have a method for disposing of bodies. They put them in essentially a mass grave, is my understanding. And I had looked for the specifics of where that was, couldn't find it, kind of counted it as lost, and then they just pointed me in the direction of where that is. But apparently there is a high school somewhere over in this area here. She said she went to and mentioned that when they were building that high school, they were doing the excavation for it. They actually found additional bodies from what's assumed to be the hospital here over there as well. So it seems like, in addition to everything else kind of weird and creepy going on here, there are just bodies buried everywhere. Oh, this is super apocalyptic looking. So this front building out here, I believe, is building 7, which served as the medical ward, medical and surgical ward. It actually replaced the original one, which I'll hopefully check out when we get down to the other section, down in the actual state park proper itself here in a minute. But this building, the rectangle sort of cube on top, served as both a water tower and also as a location for emergency services, like radio towers for emergency services in the town here. And so even after the building's closure and the hospital's closure, this actually continued to get electricity solely to maintain those radio operations for emergency services up top here until, I believe, 2001. But there is something just extra creepy about this. Not sure what it is about it that sort of extra gives me the creeps. I think my parents have one of those like Hobby Lobby looking signs that say that their place. These buildings are just crazy. And what's extra crazy is if you had the time, the inclination, and the lack of whatever, you could actually take the time to explore every one of these buildings. There are people that have essentially documented exploring all of this stuff. And so it's my understanding that towards the end of the life of the hospital in the 90s, kind of the early 90s, that most of the hospitals, keep calling it a hospital, I don't know that you want to call it a hospital, it's a psychiatric center, but most of their operations had transitioned to sort of being within this little cluster here. And it's my understanding there's like a breezeway of sorts that connects these buildings. That looks like it right there. And so I believe that that building over there, which it doesn't look like we can get over to, is building 21. This is building 22. And I believe this was, where am I at here? This was patient housing. And this was like hospital admissions or something along those lines. Who is fitting through this? Yeah, this whole section up here just has a whole different vibe to it. It's like noon on a Saturday, and these just give off the creepiest vibes. Can you see? I don't know if the camera will pick it up, but right through there, you can see through the old stairwell into a door, probably used to access the floor from the stairwell. So one thing I'm trying to figure out, I think it's been demolished since, but I think there used to be a building out front, what was called the Day Center or something like that, and that housed all the recreational stuff. Had a bowling alley, a movie theater. I believe it's where the post office might have been too. Okay, so I think that does it for this upper section here. So what do you say we go down and check out the sort of original older buildings, original portion of the complex that was the first to be incorporated into, I don't know if that's the right word, made into a state park. And in the process of doing that, I want to drive by an area here that I'm pretty sure is blocked off, and maybe also try to check out that graveyard as well really quick before going down the hill. So let's go and check that out. So I'm not sure where that plaque is for the Potter's Field mass grave. I'm gonna have to see if I can figure it out before I leave. But up here, this is a set of, I believe, 4 buildings known as, I believe it was called the Quad. But this is where geriatric patients were housed. And these have all been clearly explored to pieces as well. But right across the street from the backside of a lot of these buildings here, and what's super interesting is right next to all this stuff is an active bar and grill called Shanahan's. That I was hoping to eat lunch at, but given my stupid celiac disease, there's like nothing on their menu that I can have at all. So it's annoying, super annoying when that happens. But yeah, so let's go over to the park, like the main part of the park here, and check out the original, some of the more original buildings. And there's just another set of crazy buildings back here too. The footprint of this place is absolutely massive. All right, so now we're across the street in the actual state park proper. And this is even wilder than the other side, like the Building 93 side that we were on before. Like, I want to see here, because this is like some general sort of welcome center. It's like a welcome center to an abandoned location with signs and stuff. I gotta go and check that out real quick. Welcome to the Nissequogue Bird Conservation Area. That's what they're calling it. So we are, where are we? We're here. So these are all just the abandoned buildings. So between 1923 and 27, the state New York built the Veterans Memorial Hospital as a unit of the Kings Park Psychiatric Center for World War I veterans on this site. The facility closed by '96 and the buildings became vacant. Governor Pataki designated the property Nissequogue River State Park on November 10, 1999 to preserve and protect the property's natural beauty and recreational potential. The what? The property's natural beauty and recreational potential. I'm glad that they've been preserved, but you don't need to preserve all these old buildings. What the heck? Whatever. Let's go check out some of these buildings. I still can't wrap my head around creating a state park out of the old, totally abandoned psychiatric center and not even acknowledging it, but instead calling it a bird conservation area, which maybe there is that component to it. But what about, like, this? We're just not going to talk about this? Oh, actually, there's some stuff on the door. Maybe they put up, like, historical information? No, it's all about the window art. The artistic window coverings you see in front of you are created by schools, scouts, and people from the community to soften the harsh look of the buildings. These panels reflect Long Island's natural environment, but listen, I get that this is funny or ironic coming from me and the type of videos I make and my interests, but you want to know how they could soften the harshness of these old vacant buildings? They could just tear them down instead of making a state park out of it and doing a bunch of paintings all over the windows. But again, I'm torn because I'm thankful they're still here because this is super cool to check out. But at the same time, like, what are they talking about? I don't know. This is the trippiest place. So this building was apparently another patient ward built in the 1920s, as well as these two buildings down here, which I believe were also veterans. And I wonder if these were the World War I veterans patient housing that we read about on that sign. But I'm coming down here specifically to see if a building still exists in between the two of these that was apparently a patient isolation ward. Oh, and they're connected too. Looks a lot like there's that one breezeway crescent. This comment comes because everywhere you go around here, you're seeing people sort of walking their dogs, walking their pets, doing recreation stuff. But I've seen more than a handful of people just actively breaking into these buildings. Broad daylight, who cares? And I don't know if the local citizens, townsfolk have just been desensitized to it or what, but I've never seen such blatant behavior before. I don't really know how you have... Maybe I'm wrong about what this is, because I don't know how you have, unless they've been torn down, isolation cells, those big open rooms like that. So you want to know why that place didn't look quite right as an isolation place? Because it wasn't. The little building I want to find is actually behind that. So let's go around the corner here, see if we can find it. You've got houses. It's right here in a road that goes out to a dock. Not this road, but a road out there. Just goes down to a water access point. Oh, yeah, I think that's it back there. Yeah, that looks totally boarded up. But apparently that was a patient isolation building. Yeah, totally boarded up. Well, that's disappointing. All right, let's go keep looking. So if I'd bothered to read my own notes or just look at the sign going across the door, I would have noticed that this was the original medical and surgical building that I talked about before. And this was apparently built in 1926. And that new one, the radio tower one, was built in 1966, at which point this shifted and became a patient housing unit. So that makes a lot more sense and closes the gap on that. Because I was looking around trying to figure out where that was because I know I'd read about it. Just had to read the sign on the door. Sometimes all you have to do is read. I mean, here we are again, right? Just abandoned and complete overgrowth. I mean, abandoned everywhere here. And then, baseball field. Picnic area. So actually, my knowledge of the buildings up here is not as extensive as I thought, even with my notes. I have no idea what any of this stuff is here. Doesn't look like there's any information anywhere, so I don't know. We'll check them out real quick, maybe walk over to the water and call it a day. What do you think? So at the far north end of campus, where campus runs into the Long Island Sound and across the water, Connecticut, and under the continuous watchful eye of our friend, Building 93 off in the distance there, we are going to call it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed this walkthrough, or attempted walkthrough, of the impossible to exhaustively explore former Kings Park Psychiatric Center, located on Long Island in New York. If you enjoy this sort of thing, you know the drill. Like button, subscribe button, notifications, comments, any sort of interaction helps out the channel. And yeah, it's cold, so I'm gonna go get back in the car and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. All right, bye.